Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to be continuing my 1970 Palma de Mallorca series for Fischer. And in case you don't know yet, Fischer played one of his best tournaments at the Palma de Mallorca with a score of 18.5 out of 23 games, with 15 wins, 7 draws, and 1 loss. And here I'll take you through round 2 of the Palma de Mallorca series for Fischer. And in this game, he played against Vasily Smyslov. And he was black, so let me flip the board. In this game, Smyslov tried a lot against Fischer, but failed to do any progress, while Fischer played tactic after tactic and soon won. So here is a sample example of how Fischer was able to convert this game. Vasily Smyslov started with c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, g3, c5. So it has just transposed back into symmetrical English. Bishop g2, knight c6, b3, e6, bishop e2, knight g7, and here white plays the move knight a4, which sometimes feels dubious, but usually it's not that bad of a move. And the main plan is just to trade off the dark squared bishops. And now black has these weak light squares because he doesn't have his dark squared bishop. But normally this isn't a big deal because black can just castle. After e3, black can play d5. And after this continuation is played, black is going to regain the center squares. But black does not have that good dark squared bishop anymore. C takes, knight e2, and here b6 is played. So to give this bishop room to come out on a6 or just to go b7, h1, there we go. However, here Smyslov plays d4 immediately, and after bishop a6, dc5, here Fischer plays an amazing move. So take your time, and I hope that you can spot Fischer's next move. And just telling you, it's not b takes d5. Okay, if you found the move, congratulations. In this position, Fischer played the amazing move queen f6, seemingly to abandon this knight to attack the weak knight on b2. And there is a very smart continuation after this move, because after knight c4, here Fischer plays the absolute brilliant move, knight c3, attacking knight, attacking queen, so this almost forces white to take. After queen takes, here, if knight d2 is played, and all of a sudden the move knight e5 comes, threatening knight d3. The king cannot castle because there's a bishop on a6. And now white's best move is just to play bishop f1, which allows the next move rook a d8. Just sacrificing this bishop in plan of playing rook takes d2. If queen takes d2, knight f3 picks up the queen. Picks up the queen for absolutely nothing. And other than that, there's no other move to play. And black's just going to play rook a2, rook a1 with the discovery check. And black's just going to win easily. So knight d2 is impossible. If queen d2 is played, then just queen takes a1. And so there are only the two king moves left, king f1 and king e2. If king e2 is played, then rook a d8 attacks the queen. And because this is, and because this bishop on a6 to e2 is still a pin, the rook can come to d2 and give a check. Which is why, in this position, Smyslov played king f1, which is by far the best move. But here, Fischer just plays bishop c4. Actually, no. Fischer plays rook f d8 first. After queen c1, then plays bishop c4. And the whole point of playing rook f d8 first is just to take control of the d-file in case of any missed opportunities. After b takes c4, the queen uses the d-file to give a check. After king g1, rook a c8, c takes, a takes, and here Smyslov plays queen b2. And here, Fischer is temporarily down a pawn, but now Fischer can play knight a5, and this queen and these two rooks are a lot more active than that rook on h1. And this is why Fischer has to be better here. So Smyslov plays h4, he tries to break open with h5, h6, and try to do this stuff. Again? Alright, this stuff with queen g7, and also wants to develop the rook outside. However, here Fischer just takes a pawn for free. After queen f6, queen f5. And the main point for exchanging queens right now is because black has all the open files. And the open files will prove dispel disaster for Smyslov. So in this case, queen takes f5 is played. And here, which pawn would you take it? Would you play e takes f5 or g takes f5? Take your time. Okay, if your first intuition was g takes f5, then you will be on a good track. Because g takes f5 is a better move than e takes f5. Because if you played e takes f5 instead in this position, then all of a sudden h5 comes, and although the computer doesn't realize anything bad about it, practically this is a lot worse. Because now this rook is actually going to be able to develop itself. And after h5, if you play g5, because you want to prevent the move rook h4, then white can play h6. Now rook h5 suddenly becomes a threat. And now king h2 can come and then bring the rook to the other side. And notice how this pawn is very far advanced and protects this square, thus making back rank problems possible. But g takes f5 just eliminates all of that, because after h5, which is what it was played in the game, Fischer can save tempi not to protect against rook h4, because the h5 pawn was attacking g6, which no longer exists. Here Fischer plays rook d2 using that extra tempo, and after rook c1, here Fischer plays rook c5, making sure that the rook has a pawn support, so now the knight can move. After rook h4, knight e5, here Smyslov makes a big mistake. He takes the rook on c5, but after taking, here Fischer could have played rook d1 check. Instead, Fischer played b takes c5 first. But if Fischer had played rook d1 check, here if king h2, then b takes c5 can be played. And the main difference now is that the king has no way of stopping this pawn from promoting. c4, c3, c2 is going to happen extremely fast, and there's nothing that white can do. Instead, after b takes c4, Smyslov first brings his rook to the other side, and after c4 is played, he can play h6. This threatens mate, so king f8 is forced. And here, rook a3 stopped the advance temporarily. And after rook a3 would have stopped the advance temporarily, I shouldn't have said it that way. But instead, rook a8 was played by Smyslov, which is a slight mistake, because here king e7 can be played, which will reach d7 a lot earlier than white should expect, because playing the idea with rook c8 first just drops this pawn. And after this pawn's drop, say bishop f1 is played, the rook just comes back, and black is up a pawn and still completely winning. Here king g2 is played, and here Fischer just cashes in, plays knight g4, and now the rook is gonna capture on f2 and the knight's attacking h6. And the knight's also attacking e3, so c4 cannot be taken. For example, if rook takes, then knight takes e3 is played, followed by fork on the rook, because you cannot take the knight due to this pin. So thus, king g2 was another major mistake, and after knight g4, the king just has to go back. And here Fischer just plays rook takes f2, after bishop takes f4, c4, rook f3, so Fischer's just cashing in at this point. And after king g2, rook takes e3, black has 2 pawns up, rook h8, knight takes h6, rook takes h7, knight g4, and after Smyslov plays a few bishop moves, because it's the only thing he can do. After rook b2 check, if king f3 was played, then rook f2 is a main one. This is a very standard mate. And other than that, king g1 was played, and here Fischer just plays knight e5, attacking the bishop. The bishop comes to a8. After rook b8, here Smyslov, after playing the move bishop h1, decided to resign. So Fischer, why did Smyslov resign here? Mainly because this g3 pawn is gonna fall via this sequence. The rook comes to b3. If the rook comes to h3, then Fischer just needs to play the move knight g4, and now the move f4 is coming due to this pin. And there's no way that white can stop it. If the king comes, say king h2, then just knight g4 check. And after the king comes to g2, which is the only square to protect this pawn, you can suddenly see that this bishop is just stuck. And here, Fischer can play the very strong move, rook b1, which completely attacks the bishop, so this rook must defend in order to move the king. and if the king moves now, just to move rook b2. And now rook f2 mate is threatened, so the king needs to come up again. And basically after king f6, white needs to sacrifice his rook in order to stop mate, but obviously this is losing. So you cannot protect the pawn with the king, and you cannot protect the pawn with the rook. The bishop can never protect the pawn, and thus the g3 pawn is dropping. And in fact, king f1 is white's best move. After rook to g3, black's just 3 pawns up, and this endgame is going to be a very easy win. Which is why, in this position, after Smyslov played the move bishop h1, he resigned. So what can we learn from Fischer from this game? A lot, actually. Firstly, the symmetrical English was played in this game, and Fischer decided to play the ambitious move e6. I may have not mentioned it earlier, mainly because it's so rare, but e6 is sometimes very strong, even with the g6 move, which weakens the dark squares due to the push of d5, d4, or just d5. And after bishop b2, knight g7, knight a4, the bishops are traded off, and here black just castles. And after e3, here black can just play d5 again, and now black's position will slowly but surely get even better, and mainly it's because that now all of black's pieces are fully in place to be opened up. If c takes, and well here e takes could have been better than knight takes, but knight takes is still intuitively better because now this diagonal opens. And as you will remember, here after d takes c5, black played the amazing move queen f6, and after knight c4, followed up with the amazing move knight c3. And after the trade, slowly but surely, black gained pawn after pawn and gained the advantage slowly but surely. So he first picks up these pawns, then he trades the queens, and after the queen trade, rook d2 was played, and after rook c1, rook c5 was played, giving the rook pawn support. And although the Fischer endgame is rook and bishop versus rook and knight, that doesn't mean that Fischer is not really good at playing with the knight. In fact, Fischer could be understandably even better using the knight. However, after rook c5, rook h4, knight e5, rook takes c5, b takes c5, rook a4, in this position, Fischer's just completely winning. Because now this pawn is way too strong, this knight is way too strong, this rook on d2 is just a monster, and white's pawns are all on the wrong side. If white didn't have an e-pawn, and instead that e-pawn was on b3, then white should still be okay here. But now that passed pawn is just way too strong, and now in order to take that passed pawn, white has to sacrifice almost all his kingside pawns. And now black's just 2 pawns up due to that strong pawn on c4 that I was just about to promote. And here black can just easily play a few moves, and black's now winning. Well, bishop h1 was the last move of the game, but it just showed that this game was actually quite short. It was only 44 moves long, and for a Super GM game, that's actually extremely short. And that was one of Fischer's major masterpieces. I'm using chess.com report. Here Fischer had a 98.9 accuracy in this classical game, and Fischer's only inaccuracy was actually this move e6, and where white can actually take advantage for bishop a3, and this move has been analyzed before now, and the main motif is that after b6 is played, here the move bishop c6 can be played. After d takes c6, just the move knight f3, and this continuation may not be the best for white because bishop takes c3 is now commonly played too, and this line is quite crazy, but usually white is on the upper hand. But other than bishop a3, which is understandable after b6, here white has a very strong move of rook c1. Now this move might seem strange at first, but the main plan is that now e6, e3, d4, both of these moves are going to be coming. And after the move d4 is breaking in, black's going to have a hard time castling due to that bishop here. So black needs to castle as soon as possible, and after e3, he should play bishop b7. And after knight g2, black should castle. In this position, we've just almost transposed back into the original position, but now white can just strike out with d4, and here white's position is better. But other than that, other than e6, Fischer just played a brilliant game this entire time. He took with the knight, but he corresponded with queen f6. He made a few tactics and started gaining pawn by pawn, taking on c4, trading the queens, taking with the g pawn. So now Fischer's going to win extra tempi. And here, rook d2, and then followed by the other rook bring. And after rook takes c5, that was a big mistake because it allowed this passed c pawn. And now all these moves are just practically forced for white, and Fischer can just take all the pawns and just have a very easy position to play with. And bishop h1 was the end of the game. So I hope that you enjoyed something from this game, and I'll see you in my next coverage of the Palma de Mallorca series. Bye bye.